Hey YouTube, this is Marcus with another video. Today we're going to be installing a Rust server on a Linux box. I've already done a video on how to do this on Windows, so if you're running Windows and want to run your own Rust server, you can go check out my video on that topic. But today we're going to be doing it on a Debian Linux box. The steps in this video should pretty well translate over to Debian-derived distributions like Ubuntu and Linux Mint, with the exception of in Ubuntu you're going to use sudo instead of su to do things as root, and you probably don't have to manually enable your non-free repositories on Ubuntu and things of that nature. But generally speaking, the names of the packages that you have to install and things of that nature should pretty well translate to distributions that are derived from Debian. So we're going to be doing this in a virtual machine that's running Debian Linux 9 stretch. Now you can see over here on the left side of the screen I've got a little bit of a checklist. So let's go ahead and just go down the checklist. The first thing we need to do is we need to enable the non-free repositories, because in Debian there are no non-free repositories that are enabled by default. So we need to turn those on, because that's where we're going to find SteamCMD. So let's go ahead and open our terminal. Now all of the stuff I'm doing can be done only with a terminal interface. So if you're interacting with your server over an SSH connection, that's perfectly fine. You're just going to use nano instead of gedit to edit your text files and things of that nature. I'm just going to be using the graphical user interface here. So the first thing we need to do is become root in our terminal. And then we need to edit our apt sources list to enable the non-free repository. So we're going to do nano space /etc/apt/sources.list. We're going to go down here and we're going to every one of these lines that says deb and deb-source, we're just going to go to the end and do space contrib space non-free, and we're going to do that for every one of these. Once we're done, we're going to do Control and O to save the file. It's going to ask file name to write. We're just going to leave it as it is, the same file name. Then we're going to do Control and X to exit. The next thing we need to do is enable this Linux system to use 32-bit packages, because this is a 64-bit distribution. So by default, it's only going to look for 64-bit packages in the repository. So we need to tell it to do otherwise. So we're going to do dpkg space -- add -- architecture space i386. Enter. You will get no output from that. And now we're going to do apt-get update. And that's going to update the list of packages that are available, including the 32-bit packages that we just enabled in apt. So now we're going to go ahead and first we're going to check for updates just to make sure that the system itself is up to date. So we're going to do apt-get upgrade and space apt-get dist-upgrade. Alright, so we're all up to date. So now we're going to do apt-get install SteamCMD :i386, because it's a 32-bit package. So even after you add the i386 architecture, if you want to use the 32-bit version of a package, you have to still specify :i386 at the end of the line here. So now we're going to hit enter. It's going to ask if we want to continue, because there are some dependencies that it has to install, so we're just going to say yes and enter. When it gets to this point, you're just going to press the tab key to go down to the OK button and hit enter. Then you're going to hit down arrow to I agree and hit enter. Alright, now before we actually get into SteamCMD, we're also going to install another package called UFW. UFW is just a sort of easy to use interface for your firewall rules. If you're doing this with a GUI and you want a graphical option for that, you can also do GUFW or GUFW. So we're going to do apt-get install UFW. If you want the graphical version, just do that and it will install UFW as a dependency, but we're just going to do the command line version. After UFW is installed, we need to go ahead and add 2 ports to make our Rust server visible once it's up and running. So we're going to do UFW space allow space 28015, enter. Then we're going to do the same command, but we're going to do 28016. Alright, so now that we have added our firewall rules, we've installed SteamCMD, we'll go ahead and run the exit command to exit back out of the root terminal and back out to your normal user terminal. And then you need to make a folder where you want your Rust server installed. So we've already got a folder set up here that is an external drive that is going to be where our Rust server is installed to. You can place it in your downloads folder, just make a folder called Rust server or whatever you want it to be. Ours is going to be this location right here, this external drive we've got attached. So let's pop back over to our terminal here, and we're going to change directory into that folder. So we're going to do cd space /media/me/steam. You're going to insert the full path to whatever folder it is that you want to install your Rust server to. So let's go ahead and hit enter. Now we're going to go ahead and run SteamCMD. Now some walkthroughs will have you actually create a separate user just for running SteamCMD. That's not necessary. I wouldn't recommend running it as root, but you can run it as any user account you want to. So we're just going to run it as our normal user account here. So we're going to go ahead and run the command SteamCMD. It's going to go ahead and download and update itself real quick. Once you drop to this command line interface, we are no longer interacting with the Linux system. We are now interacting with SteamCMD or Steam itself. So we're going to do login space anonymous. Then we're going to run force _ install _ dir space the full path to where you want your Rust server files to be installed to. The folder doesn't have to be the folder doesn't have to exist. If it doesn't exist, it will create it. So we're going to do /media/me/steam/rust, and we're going to press enter. You won't get any output from that. It basically just sets a variable. Then we're going to run app _update space 258550. And when we hit enter, it's going to download and install the Rust server software, and it's going to take a little while depending on the speed of your internet connection and your PC. Alrighty, so after it's actually done installing the Rust server, you'll see this little message, success app 258550 fully installed. You'll see it created the folder Rust. We're actually done with SteamCMD, so let's go ahead and exit SteamCMD. And let's go ahead and clear our terminal window here so it's a little bit easier to see what all is going on. There we go. Alright, so now what we need to do is actually create the script that we're going to use to start our Rust server. I've already got one created here, so I'm going to go ahead and open it and show it to you and explain the different parts of it to you. The first line is hashtag !bin/bash. That basically just tells the Linux system what interpreter to use on the commands that come next. The next line here is SteamCMD space plus login space anonymous space plus force install dir /foo space plus app up _update space 258550 space plus quit. So basically in this script, every occurrence of the word foo needs to be replaced with the path that we're actually going to use as our Rust installation location. So let's go ahead and open the Rust folder here, copy that path, and paste it here. So basically what this command does, it runs SteamCMD, logs in as anonymous, sets the installation directory for your Rust server, and then checks for updates to the Rust server software. The next line here is actually something I figured out on my own because I kept getting, at least on Debian, I kept getting error messages about how it couldn't locate certain library files and things of that nature. So we're going to export space all caps ld _library _path equals /foo, so we need to replace that with the path, colon /foo /rust dedicated, so let's replace that foo /rust dedicated because there is the Rust dedicated executable right there, colon left bracket, but it's not the regular bracket, it's the squiggly one. I forget what it's called. All caps LD underscore library underscore path, close bracket, space, semicolon. And then the next line here is what we're basically doing is we're going to launch the Rust server in the background. Anything you launch with the command nohup creates a separate output file and sends the command sort of to the background. So we're going to do nohup space period / Rust dedicated, and then all of the arguments that you want to send to the Rust server, space and symbol at the end, and that completes and sends it to the background so you can close your terminal and not kill the Rust service in the background. So while editing this video, I realized that I didn't actually explain what a lot of the arguments in this command to launch your server actually do. So if you're curious what the nitty-gritty details of these arguments are, you can actually just look up the Rustified walkthrough on how to host your own Rust server, and they give you a pretty good primer on some of the basic commands that you may want to add or some modifications you may want to make. Just remember that since you're running the server on Linux, anytime you see a plus sign at the beginning of a argument like this, you need to replace that plus sign with a minus sign since we're doing this on Linux. But there's some arguments that I did not include in the setup script that I did that you may want to include in yours. But here's some of them that are on the Rustified walkthrough, and you feel free to go check it out and look it up yourself. There's a wealth of knowledge online regarding setting up your own Rust server, but using the configuration that I did in my little startup script is a good way to just get yourself a sort of generic vanilla server up and running. So you've got your -batch mode, -no graphics. Server identity just specifies the subfolder that it's going to make for the server. Archon port. Archon is basically a remote command line interface for the Rust server. So let's say your Linux box is a server, or you're going to play Rust on your Windows box but host a server on your Linux box. Archon is the service that would allow you to log in remotely from the other machine you're playing the game on and run commands to give people items and things of that nature. Archon-archon.password is the password to log in to Archon. -archon.web1. -server.description is going to be the description, but you're only going to see this if it's advertised in the actual in-game interface, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. In my other video where I set up the Rust server on Windows, we forwarded the ports on my router and I showed you how to do that, but I'll touch on it in this video as well. But basically this is our Rust server startup script. So we're going to go ahead and save it. We're going to go back here and cut it, drop it into the folder here, and then we're going to reopen our terminal. And to make sure that we don't get permission denied, we're going to do chmod 770 start rust.sh, and then we're going to do // start rust.sh. And you can see it's going to run down our script. And once it does everything else, once you see this line that basically says nohup appending output to nohup.out, at that point you can press the enter key and it'll return you to your regular terminal, and the Rust server is starting up, generating all of its first time files and running in the background. So we can actually run the command top, and we can see here Rust dedicated at the top of the list, job 3378. That's using up the majority of our resources. So we'll press Q, and we'll give that about 5 to 10 minutes to get started. And in the meantime, we'll go ahead and start Rust on the client machine here running Windows that's actually going to connect to the server. Alrighty, so let's pop back over here to our virtual machine, our Linux box, real quick, and let's look in here, and you will see that there's actually now a file called nohup.out that will have the output of the Rust server. So you can see that's the output from the Rust server as it's doing its thing. So let's pop back over here to the machine that we're going to connect to it from. And what you're going to do here is you're going to go ahead and press the F1 key to bring up this sort of terminal here. And you're going to run client.connect space. And let's make sure what our IP is on the server here. Our IP address is, yeah, okay, 10.1.1.11. So we'll pop back over here. We're going to say 10.1.1.11 colon 28015 because that's the port that the Rust server is running on. We're going to press enter. It's going to take a while because the first time a user logs into the game, it has to generate all this content for the first time. And so it may actually take quite a while the first time a person logs into the server. Connection attempt failed. So let's give it another few minutes to do its thing, and then we'll try again in just a few minutes. Alright, so it looks like the server's up and running. It just took a little while for everything to be ready for people to log in. So the client here is going to do its thing, and we'll give it some time because, like I said, the first time the client tries to log in, it sometimes takes quite a while. Alrighty, so we're logged into the server here. Let's go ahead and wake ourselves up. Oh, there we go. So we are now logged into our Linux Rust server, which is running over here on this Linux machine from our Windows client over here. And if, let's say we wanted to do some stuff, you can see it shows Amsterdam 2 here. Ignore this. This is the default server title and description that you're going to get if you are not advertised in the in-game game browser or server browser. So to prove that we're actually running on this, let's go ahead and open up Rust Admin. Rust Admin is actually an Archon client for Windows that allows you to connect to Rust servers. So let's go over here to our configuration tab, and we've got it pointed to our 10.1.1.11. Let's update our password here to the one that we specified as YouTube and save it. Okay. And we'll click server and connect, and we can see that we have one player logged in. We can go over here and see that it's me. So we can see right now I have, let me see, no items in my inventory here, but if I come over here to my Rust admin, I can go to the console and I can say inventory.give to me rifle.ak, and you saw in Rust here I now have an AK-47. So we are logged in. We are hosting the Rust server on our Linux server, and we have logged into that server from our Windows client. We've also connected to it with Rust admin so that we can actually issue commands to it and give people items and things of that nature. However, now, in the game here, you can see that, however, we cannot give ourselves any items because we're not a moderator or an owner on this server. So in order to make somebody an owner on the server, what we're going to do is we're going to pop over to Rust admin, and in the command box here, we're actually going to run the command player list. And it will list all of the players currently connected to the server. And one of those lines is going to be SteamID. So what we're going to do, we're going to use that SteamID, and we're going to say owner ID space that SteamID, and then the name you want that person to be known as. So I'm just going to put Garowin. Now, if you want to add other people who have moderator powers but not set them as the owner of the server, you can do the same thing with the command moderator ID. So now that we've added myself as an owner, I want this configuration to persist. So we're going to say server.write.cfg and then say server.save. And now let's pop back over to Rust. I will disconnect with there we go, and then reconnect, and when I re-log into the server here, I will actually have the ability to run those commands with my in-game character, and I don't have to have the Rust admin console up and running to run those commands. Alrighty, so we can see we've got our AK-47 here, but we have no ammo for it. But now what we should be able to do, now that we are an owner, we can press the F1 key to bring up our terminal here, and we should be able to say run commands here, player list. So let's say inventory.give to Garowin, I think it's ammo.rifle 500. And now we should be able to reload our rifle. And we hold tab. Yep, there's our ammunition. So now we give ourselves ammunition. We could also say ammo.rifle.explosive. Get rid of this stuff. Run out the ammo that's in it, and it reload with explosive ammunition. Alright, so we have successfully set up our Rust server on our Linux machine. We have logged into that server from another machine. We have given ourselves administrative rights over the server and ran a few commands to make sure that it's actually working. How do you advertise this server over the internet so that other people can see it and connect to it? What you have to do is you have to forward the ports for your server on your router over the internet. So basically, what we would do is, let's go ahead and open up our web browser here. And first you need to know how to get to your router's configuration pages. The router that you're using in your house, your gateway to the internet, has an IP address that you can punch into your web browser and get to a configuration page on it. To get the IP address for it, what we're going to do is, in Windows, I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to right click this little network icon. If you don't see it, try clicking the little up arrow here. We're going to right click it, hit open network and internet settings, and then we're going to click, I believe it's view your network properties. And you can see here our default gateway is 10.1.1.1. The way you find your default gateway in a Linux environment is either run as root the command route space -n. You can see our gateway here is 10.1.1.1. Or if you're using GNOME, you can click up here, click wired connection, or wireless if you're doing this over wireless. Click wired settings. And you can see here the default route, or aka default gateway, is 10.1.1.1. So we're going to punch that into our web browser. Now I'm using a Linksys router, so this part of the walkthrough is going to cover how to do this on a Linksys router. So once you get to the web page here, there's going to be a password. It may actually pop up a little box asking for a username and password. If you didn't change the password when you set the router up, the default password, you can probably find it with Google, you know, Linksys default admin password, or D-Link, or whatever brand your router is. It's probably listed in the instruction manual that came with the router. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my router here. Now once I'm in here, two things need to happen. Number one, if that machine that is currently hosting the Rust server is going to be the one that's always hosting that Rust server that you want people to be able to connect to, we need to reserve the IP address for that server so that it never changes. Because basically, anytime that server gets an IP address from your router, you want to make sure it gets the same IP address. So let's go ahead and go to connectivity. We're going to click on local network. We're going to click the button that says DHCP reservations. And once you're in the DHCP reservations window here, you're going to find the IP address for the server. So we know that that server is 10.1.1.11. So we could just go ahead and select this box and hit add DHCP reservation. I'm not going to do it because I've already got the ports forwarded to my actual Rust server that people actually play on. But you would check the box next to the item that you want to save that IP for, hit add DHCP reservation, and then hit OK. If you don't see the item listed here, or if the item's not currently turned on but you still want to make sure that when you turn it on it gets the IP that you want, you can click manually add device registration. The device name is whatever you want it to be, the IP address is whatever IP you want it to always get, and the MAC address is going to be the MAC address for that device's network card. In Windows, in this same area over here, view your network properties, your MAC address is your physical address right here. In Linux, since we're dealing with a Linux server here, we're going to run /sbin/ifconfig, and we're going to look for ETH0 because that's the network connection that I'm using, 10.1.1.11. And what we're looking for is right here, ether 08:00:27 blah blah, ends in 963 Fox. So if we pop over here, we can see that's the MAC address listed here. But if the device isn't powered on, so it's not listed here, and you want to manually add it, that's how you get the MAC address in Windows and Linux. Alright, so you've reserved the IP address for that thing, so it always gets that same IP address. Well, now how do you forward that traffic so that that server gets advertised on the internet? The next thing we need to do is close out all of these windows, go to Security, Apps and Gaming, Single Port Forwarding, and then add a new single port forwarding. You're going to name it whatever you want to name it. The external port will be 28015. The internal port will be 28015. Protocol both. And the IP address of the server. So in this case it would be 1.11. But we're not going to do that because I've already got a Rust server set up and running here. So after you add your forward and you hit apply and OK, then you can close this out. Then you can pop back over into Rust. Click Play Rust button, maybe hit the Refresh All button, click the Community tab, and then sort by ping because yours is going to be the lowest ping server, and you should see your server listed right here. So this is the server that I have actually running on my Linux box in the other room in there. Now remember, your server is going to be listed under Community, not under Official Servers. So we have set up and started our Rust server on a Linux box. We have connected to that Rust server from another machine, and we have forwarded ports to that Rust server using our router software so that other people on the internet can see our Rust server. In the event that you're not using a Linksys router, there's a reasonable chance that you're not using a router with the same type of firmware that mine is using. Do a Google search on how to reserve IP addresses and how to forward ports on your router, because the end result of what you need to do if you want other people to connect is you need to reserve an IP address for the machine that is hosting the server, and then you need to forward ports to that IP address. If you're not going to be running a Rust server 24/7, 365, you don't even have to worry about reserving the IP address. Just forward the port for however long that you want people to be able to connect, and then call it a day. But if you're going to run a dedicated server that's going to be running most of the time, you need to reserve the IP address and forward the ports. So that is how you set up a Rust server on a Linux system. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, or suggestions, if there's anything that I didn't cover, please feel free to post a comment in the comment section below, and I will try to get to it as necessary. And even if I don't know the answer, I will try to point you in the general direction of some place that might give you the answer to the issue that you're having. And as always, this is Garrowin out. Y'all have a good one. Alright guys, so I just wanted to record this quick caveat here to the video because I realized that I didn't really cover. Let's say you're playing on Linux and you don't have any Windows machines in the house, but you still want to be able to interact with the Archon console on your Rust server. Things get a little bit tricky because, number one, I have not, at least me personally, I could be wrong, I have not personally been able to find any easy to set up Archon software for Linux. I can't find any listed in the Debian repositories. I found a couple that were source code, but my days of compiling source code and going through the dependency hell are over, so I'm not going to fool with that. So the choices for Archon software on Linux are limited. I tried using Rust admin in Linux with Wine, and it actually didn't work, so maybe with some tweaking somebody might be able to get it to work, but right out the gate with just a stock Wine install, Rust admin did not work. And for whatever reason, in the Windows version, with the Windows version of the Rust server, when you launch your server, it brings up the little command line window, and that command line window becomes a Rust a console interface for the Rust server. So you can issue commands to the server from right there without having to install any other software besides the Rust server itself. With the Linux version, however, let's open up Let's say you get rid of the no hup and the and sign at the end, on either end of your command to launch the server here, so that the terminal stays open. This terminal does not turn into a command line interface for the server on the Linux version for whatever reason, I don't know. But you can see over here on our Windows client side, we're connected to it, and we can issue a command here and get some output. But over here, we can't. This is just trailing output from the Rust server itself, but it doesn't give you that command line interface. So the only way you really have to interact with the server and issue commands is with a Windows box running something like Rust admin, or by logging into the game yourself and issuing those commands from there. However, you need to make sure that you are an owner of the server so you can issue all of those commands. So the first thing you need to do is just log in as yourself, log into your server, and then disconnect and log back out, and that'll help that'll get the server to generate all the files it needs and get everything set up. And then what you do is you come over here into your Rust server installation folder. You're going to go into server, server 1, CFG, and if there's not a file named users.cfg, go ahead and create it. It's just an empty text file, and then open it. And in here you want to put owner ID space the 64-bit Steam ID of yourself, your name that you want to be known by on the Rust server in quotation marks, space, and then the reason that that person is being made owner in quotation marks as well. Now your Steam ID, this is your 64-bit Steam ID. So you can just Google Steam ID Finder, and there's all kinds of websites where you can punch in your Steam username, and you want your 64-bit Steam ID. So go ahead and just put owner ID space 64-bit Steam ID space name in quotes space reason in quotes, and save that users.cfg file, and then kill the server process, and then restart your Rust server, and then once it's back up and running again, log into it in your game, and then you should be able to run administrative commands with your in-game character without having to use any third-party Archon software. It's a little bit more involved. It's not quite as easy as it is on Windows. So if you have a Windows machine, or if you're playing on a Windows machine where you can use Rust admin, that's no big deal. You can use Rust admin to connect to your Linux server, but if you only have Linux machines that you're going to be using to host the server and play the game, it's not quite that straightforward. So I just wanted to let you guys know I did not ignore that issue altogether. It's just that there's not as many options for easily administering the server besides just making yourself an owner and logging into the game with your in-game character.